Welcome to the Performing Animal Rights podcast, where we explore the intersection of creative practice and animal rights activism. I'm your host Ben Hunt, a performance artist and researcher in performance studies and animal advocacy. Each episode I speak with artists, campaigners and creatives who are challenging the way we think about animals, justice and the role of art and social change. Today I'm joined by Lauren Marie Kennedy, a vegan feminist researcher and multi-disciplinary artist whose work spans poetry, digital collage and performance. With a sharp sense of satire and a deep commitment to justice, Lauren Marie blends creativity with activism in powerful, thoughtful and often disarming ways. In this episode we talk about her journey from childhood worm rescuer to spoken word performer and her creative with cause philosophy, and the way humour, research and identity shape her art. We also explore how creative practice can both challenge academic norms and offer a soft antidote to activist burnout. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new Substack newsletter, where I share extra insights, behind-the-scenes reflections and extended content from the podcast. You can find everything, episodes, newsletters and more at www.performinganimalrights.org. Let's get started. Thank you, Lauren Marie, for joining me today for the Performing Animal Rights podcast. I suppose it's just to get stuck right into it of what drew you into activism and art, and did one come before the other, or have they always been intertwined? What does that look like?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for inviting me onto this amazing podcast. I'm grateful for giving me your time as well. I guess I was always a little activist as a child. I always stood up for people. If I saw people being treated not so nicely, I would always speak up. Or I used to kind of get this reputation as the girl who helped the worms, because I used to pick up worms from the playground and put them back into the grass. I think I was always a little activist at heart. And also always super creative. My dad was a tutor and artist, and so he was my first artistic influence, I guess. I was around creative people. My mum's a great storyteller. She's super creative too. And yeah, I think I was always around it, so it made sense that they would blend at some point in my life and bleed into one another, but I just didn't know it at the time. But I was always very much sensitive to injustice and really didn't like to witness it. It really did something to my energy. And yeah, I think both emerged kind of simultaneously.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I suppose that leads on to how you call yourself a creative with cause. I
Mm,
think that's really interesting. Let's open the box. Let's open the art box
yeah.
for a second. So when we open the art box, there's questions of subjectivity and like art should be interpreted from the audience perspective. There's a lot of conversations around that. What does it mean? It
Mm,
means what you want it to mean. But creative with a cause shuts that box. It comes with the sharp, pointy stick of this means something specific. It's trying to move you in a specific way. You are creative with a cause.
mhm.
What does that mean if you were to unravel that?
I want people to get exactly what I'm about, what they're stepping into, when they witness a performance by me or they see an artwork I've made or just something that I'm doing. It is all driven. I think the way I was looking at it was that a lot of the artwork that I was making at art school and college was coming from research. I got really into the research, and I know you're big on research too. That was the driver for things. So I thought I am a creative, but it's more than that. I do have this message, and it was almost like the big pointy stick. I love that you describe it that way. So I'm really glad that you took that away from that short phrase. And it was a tutor that I had at college who said to me, I was making a lot of artwork just for the course, and just, you draw these abstract shapes or you do like a project that they've given you. And all of a sudden, we were given this brief to do your own project. And luckily for me, the theme was protest. and you were to kind of interpret that as you liked. And I was like, oh, I could really make this. This could really be a driving point for me creatively. She said, just be true to you because you're in this game a long time. So you may as well be do it authentically and be unapologetically yourself. So what does protest mean to you? That just opened up the gates for, yeah, I think at that point I was going to call myself like protest painter or something like that, or a painter with purpose. But I realized, no, I'm not just painting. I was doing a lot of other things, poetry, which I love, and research. So I thought, no, I'm a creative body. I'm a creative with a cause. And I needed to get the alliteration in there. So that was kind of where it stemmed from. But I thought that really stuck with me, you know. I'm sure you've had people too throughout your life that they say something and you look back and it's been a definitive moment. That was it for me.
I can totally resonate with individuals new doors. I think it is definitely a thing to be said, especially in the creative, in academia, in creative academia. It was nice to hear that your lecturer or your tutor gave you that license to go, okay, you're in this, so let's go and
Yeah.
let's knuckle down. And that sounds quite
Mm-hmm.
like a moment of clarity and excitement, which is
And acceptance too.
acceptance. Yeah,
Yeah, because I wasn't surrounded by vegan people, as is the case in life, you know. We are in this predominantly anthropocentric, you know, animal consuming society, and it can be very othering to be vegan within that realm. And so it was really just she really did just give me, as you say, the license to do that. And art school and art college was a real, I was surprised that it was such a playground for expression. I guess I was expecting that anyway, but it was very freeing. It was very much you do you, you know, discover it and try it out and play with things. And it was a lot of finding myself, which was great.
amazing. I mean, let's pick this creative with cause apart even more then. So
Yeah.
when we talk about cause, we talk about activism, we talk about strategy, social
Mm,
movement. When we talk about creativity, maybe we talk more about feeling and exploration and specific kinds of form of creativity and letting
mm,
things dwell. Also, let's go back to cause with urgency, desperation, and creativity. Maybe there's patience, reflection, and packaging in specific aesthetics.
sure.
When you think about your own process, because you blend quite a lot of stuff, you blend satire, humor,
Yeah.
also very weighty in emotion.
Mm.
So, where does this lie for you in regards to creative with a cause? Is it instinctive, strategic, evolved? Is it both at the same time? It's fascinating thinking about that with activists and art. There's a juxtaposition there, but there's also a complementing of each other as well. I don't know where you sit with that.
Yeah. I guess to put it this way, our movement can be quite single focused. And as I was doing research, I realized that there's so many more layers to it. So, intersectionality and feminism, which stems from Black feminism, gave me a real new lens to look at things. And I think I wanted to make it broad enough that I was accepting that there's these other parts that I recognize within veganism that are intertwined and that I still want to stand up for and to say something about, you know. So feminism and equality across, and I mean that for planet justice, I mean it for animal justice, human, everything. Although we are animals, of course, we always try and separate that, don't we? I just realised I'm checking myself. That was very anthropocentric of me. But yeah, the wide kind of animal world, and yeah, I think that it just to me was very. You mentioned satire and humour, and that became a big thing for me because I was very burnt out when I did it. You know, I was doing a lot of street activism, and I fell away from that because I realised it's not my personality. I can come across as extroverted, but I think I'm more, is it ambivert, they say? I can be kind of, or an introverted extrovert.
Yeah.
I can turn it on and come across a certain way. But again, it's performance, it's the many hats that we wear, isn't it? So I realised that I wore so many hats that it had to be a broad category. And humour and satire really became a way for me to enjoy the work and a way to have difficult conversations with people who that otherwise would, I think, recoil or turn away. You know, I wasn't getting a lot of good feedback from the work that I was making. I mean, good feedback in that it wasn't working was what I would have seen as good. You know, people were like, oh, this is interesting. I was like, no, go vegan, you know. And so I really burnt out when I was just doing things to shock people, which I think is a lot of street activism, which I'm not bashing in any way. It certainly has worked for certain people, but it wasn't, my journey was never, I mean, my journey to veganism was not through being bombarded with information or told to be a certain way. It was something that I connected with very intuitively and very, my emotions came into it, and suddenly I thought, oh my goodness, why would I ever want to do this? So I knew that I had to, maybe it is strategy, that I used humour as a way in to almost ridicule in a kind of like how we get done to us by omnivores, you know, they kind of like will ridicule us. And I was just mirroring the ridiculousness of some of the things that were said. And I thought, if we turn that, how might that change a conversation?
Amazing. That's so interesting about burnout. I think there's definitely patterns there with creatives and activists finding their own hat, like you said, wearing a lot of hats,
Mm,
but then finding their main hat and feeling good about that hat. It's like you mentioned, strategic, but it's strategic in both ways, if I may, that it's strategic as in it's adding to the movement, to
mm,
activism, to the variety of activism that's available. It's adding depth to that, but it's also strategic for you personally as an activist for
yeah,
you to maintain and continue and to grow without feeling limited or burnt out. Which is it's
yeah,
fascinating that there's been this kind of throughout my conversations that there's been regular pointings to the creative side of activism or just creativity in general being an antidote to burnout or being a at least a cushion or a light hose of burnout. Just fascinating. But thinking about strategy in that regard, there's a few things
mm-hmm,
there of new angles, but also self-care in the regards to resilience and making sure that we can express ourselves. But then
yeah,
also, like you said, of going vegan, this kind of, yeah, I totally feel that this desire for things we create or things we present to impact people on a deep level, deep enough for them to make meaningful change. I don't know how
of
you feel
course.
about that now with your embracing of humor and satire, or beyond that, where maybe you're still. I speak from my own experience. I don't get many people turning around and going, "What you've done has turned me vegan," which is
Yeah.
quite regular, I'd imagine. And if it wasn't regular, we'd be bottling it up. Whoever's got that, please bottle it up and give it to us. Um,
Yeah, we need that.
but I suppose it does that with that audience response to your work now, has that changed in regard to how you feel about your work prior to finding that rhythm that you'd found?
Yeah, oh wow, that's such a deep question to reflect back on. You know, I was thinking, funnily enough, I knew that we were going to chat and I didn't know that you would ask that, but I've been reflecting on my time at art school because I just graduated last year from the master's program, which really opened things up for me and again led me into this other path, which I would love to discover more of kind of geographical veganism and my own roots in Scotland, which then introduces ballad singing and song and how this is a tradition and different ways of making that are Scottish and understanding that. I think as I reflect on it, I'm very disconnected now from the work that I made that was shock art. I think I was just doing it because I thought that was how you did it. From my experience as a street activist, I was like, this is what I experienced, this is what I showed people. I'll need to show people. Although I definitely am grateful to have, did it that way and kind of found my way with it. But I was getting more upset than the people witnessing it. It was affecting me to the point where there was a few times where I thought I might have to pause art school and maybe return at another point. But I then just really get into the research and I would find interesting things, and I started to even make work a bit more conceptual, so it would make people really have to think about what I was trying to say. I did a postcard series that was about the environment and how that impacts animals, because it seems to be that we only care about climate when it affects us directly. Like, oh, the summers are so hot now, I'm struggling in this heat. It's like, yeah, but also this impacts animal habitats and where they live. And so I did a project called How's the Weather series, and it was, yeah, mail art postcards that symbolized, different things, and I made them humorous. And that to me was very much a changing point of, oh yeah, I can do this conceptually too. And that adds another layer of almost just taking that closeness. I was too close to things. I was taking it back and making it a bit less literal, which really helped, kind of, as you mentioned, self-care. It really helped me no longer have to witness hours and hours of footage that was awful to put myself through. But at that point, I was really like, you pay for this, you need to watch this, you should be aware. But people didn't interact so well with that. And it was really good to tell people what the imagery meant eventually, and for them to go, oh my goodness. And then I was having deeper conversations and people were like, oh, I'm going to go away and look at that. I had no idea. So it felt more fulfilling for me, and I hoped more effective. The master's program also just changed things for me, and I loved the performance of it, though. I loved making costumes and making masks, and I was introduced to the green screen. We had a green screen when I was studying at Dundee Art College, and that also changed everything for me. I was like, oh, I can make my own footage. I don't have to rely on, kind of very emotive footage. I could do this in my own way. And I used found sound, and I was very inspired by artists. There's a Scottish artist, Rachel McLean, who her work is incredible. She makes grotesque kind of costumes and comments on society, very feminist and just incredible artwork that's quite conceptual too and takes the viewer on a kind of journey. And people like Darren Cullen, who makes very satirical kind of work as well, questioning things in society. And I thought, I engage a lot more with this than I did the shock art that I was making. So yeah, that's a long way of saying that I'm quite embarrassed by that work now. But in a way, it served a purpose at that time. I was still, as I said, finding my creative way as well. So I'm grateful I made it, and I can reflect back now and say, yeah, it was a bit much. It really nearly broke me, but I found my way. I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, for sure. A good friend once said to me about that, about looking back and saying that if you're not embarrassed by your past, you haven't grown. Which
I
is
love
which
that.
is really nice. And it's, if you
Yeah.
look at it from a creative process of,
Mm,
it can be project by project, which we're used to as creatives. You think about a project, you deliver the project, you move on to the next. But actually, you can also zoom out and see it as one huge project that's always growing
yeah.
and complementing each other.
Mm-hmm. So,
Sounds like you were going deeper into your processes, you were going deeper into your reflection, you're going deeper into the core of your creative voice.
yeah.
And I think with activism, through my own experience of, I think you're right. You do start with that outrage because there's a stage of, definitely for me, where I learned the facts about what happens to non-human animals in the, especially in the farming systems and the food
Mm-hmm.
systems. And then I was like, everyone needs to know this. I know it now. I've changed, so everyone
Yeah.
else needs to know it, and they'll change. And that's
Mm,
definitely that feels like the right line, because obviously that happens to us. Obviously, there's way more nuance to that, and it took me a long to get to that point. So it's not as clear cut as that. But then once we get to that point of, well, what actually changed us? Is it a small feeling in our gut? Was it walking past something? Was it our relationship with our domestic companions, or was it a word someone said, or a phrase, and or a play I saw, or a song I heard, or a canvas I saw? So there's different threads to pull at with creative processes. Getting deeper brings out more fruitful, meaningful, creative outputs. Maybe I'm not sure. I
Mm.
suppose what's interesting on your journey is this thoughtful academic thinking. I know you're going on to do some really
Yeah.
important stuff in research. And when you use like a vegan feminist lens, and as well with this geographical layer to it, which is fascinating.
Mm.
I don't know how you feel about how that affects your way of thinking about activism and art, and whether using these lenses that you use, it kind of challenges or even just highlights what conventional activism or even academic frameworks miss.
How do you think up these questions? These are amazing. Thank you for being so engaged and such a thoughtful conversation. I'm really enjoying it, Ben. My master's was on research, and I realised that, you do an awful lot of reading for dissertation and for your thesis through, you were mentioning academic creativity. And of course, there was elements. I think people think that folk that go to art school just make paintings all day and don't engage further. But trust me, we do a lot of stuff. It was a lot of essays and a lot of writing and theory and philosophy and stuff too. And I think that trained me well for academia and what I'm about to go on and do. But also, I think there was a point where I realised that all the stuff that I was reading was quite samey, quite dry, quite kind of difficult for me. At first, I wasn't like super smart with all these big words. I didn't have much of an academic framework in that sense or understanding when I was plunged into look at this at art school. And I think it felt quite like you had to have a certain understanding to get this. I was thinking about childhood and how we learn, and I go back to that sometimes and think about how fun it was to learn with picture books, something that's engaging and bright and colourful. And somehow, as we grow up, we try and suppress that. And actually, I still really enjoy bright colours and colourful storytelling, which is why I love creativity so much. And I thought these are not very creative pieces. They're very academic and very dry, but I don't relate to that and I don't want my work to look like that. So I kind of I thought about it as I'm vegan, so that's a non-traditional viewpoint in the world anyway, or a place to find yourself in this society. And I thought, why not introduce? I was learning more about research methods and creative methods, and I thought I could maybe blend this to mirror my non-traditional identity and make academic work that's non-traditional in that sense of methods. And so I started to explore poetry, and my MRes thesis had pictures all through it, images and media critiques and collages that I was making in response to interviews I was having with people. And that felt more like the direction I would want to take that now. So that's why I was so glad that I count myself as a creative with cause, because if I was painter with purpose, it would no longer make sense to me. So I think it's driven me a lot to look at a different way to approach academia that is more inclusive and maybe more attractive, in the hopes that it's more accessible for, because I felt like at the start academia is quite inaccessible and you have to know a lot of big fancy words to be able to understand these things, and it felt a bit intimidating to me. So I just wanted to go back to what I loved as a child and be like unafraid to express that. And why shouldn't we, why should we have to put something into a machine, one of these AI things, for example, and be like, can you bite size this essay for me and make it understandable? The fact we have to do that is not great. So I just thought, why not make it more fun to read? And that's just my opinion on it, you know. And it really helped me, and I'm really glad of what my thesis then looked like. And I think I would like to continue on with that. So it was mirroring, it was that conceptual layer of mirroring kind of non-traditional. You shouldn't really be a Scottish vegan. It's not something that is traditional. So I was mirroring that and looking at Scottish veganism and feminism, and it all just made sense to me that it could look different and challenge academia that way.
This is a big question. It sounds like a simple question, but I understand when I've been asked this in the past that it's not as simple as this. But I would
Mm,
love to know your creative process and what that looks like.
that is a hard question. Can I ask yours to get an idea of what yours is like?
Yeah, and you're right, it is super sticky. I think
Mm,
it begins way before I'm aware of it,
mm,
whether that's a walk in the woods and then a thought pops into my head, and then a month
yeah,
later I'm writing a poem about something else, or and that poem contributes to an idea of a short story or a script. I suppose the biggest one I can point to is when I did a performance project about bearing witness, and it came from it came from bearing witness outside a slaughterhouse, and then I wrote a poem about it, and I sat on that
mm,
for 5 years, and then it became a
wow,
live installation of of being a non-human animal, myself performing as a non-human animal in the transport truck, being witnessed and witnessing myself, lots of witnessing
mm,
going on. So I think that's probably the clearest line I can draw without going into all the fragments that come with that, with photos I've taken, through
mm,
conversations I've had, through the smells I've smelt. And I think
yeah,
I think maybe that's where we share. Yeah, I'd love to understand the poetry side specifically, because when
mm,
I think about poetry, for me, it's very much a distilling of emotion that can't be captured in a straightforward sentence. It's an experiential expression that is somehow communicated through words,
yeah,
which is a good starting off point for me, usually.
mm,
But I know with spoken word, and I do realize that poetry and spoken word are actually quite different beasts, really. I use it as a process, whereas you've used it in the past, also at the Vegan Animal Rights Conference as well. You performed spoken word, you use it as an output as well.
yeah,
So starting from there, maybe thinking about
yeah.
what does that look like, as in, what does it begin with something and end with something, or is it a huge glob of some sort of form that you chisel away at?
I think just as you were saying that, I was like, yes, that's me. That's me. You know, I absolutely snap on that because it can just be, I just think I'm always aware of it. I'm always thinking about it. I don't watch something without pausing it and being like, okay, what does that tell me about veganism and feminism? I'm such a geek. So I just love to research, and it's usually a lot of my work has been research driven. So it's something that I fall upon, you know, or I've thought up, or it's a deeper inquiry into something that I've read or has resonated really strongly. And I think, okay, what is the output of that? What could I make that look like? This is why it's so great thinking now about creative methods and how this can help with research. And yeah, you're right, the poetry specifically, the poem that I performed came from the master's thesis and research. So it was, yeah, very much I was in that project and I thought I need to get this out in a fun way for me. So it usually ends on collage, poetry, digital art, performance of some kind. But it really does stem from really deep, obsessive research, you know. and just my mind never shuts off with it. It's really hard to disconnect from it once you're aware. So I think, yeah, very, very similar to yours, Ben. Very
That-
similar, I would say.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating. It's fascinating to hear how your groundwork is very is like, well, grounded in academic deep thinking, deep research,
Mm.
and it comes from there because you could assume that the more we get into the seriousness of things, the more we move away from art. Whereas
Mm.
you're talking about something that the more you understand something, the more you feel like you can approach it and explore it in new and exciting ways. Is there, I mean, I would be fascinated to hear if you felt any limitations to your processes or outputs, even speaking at the conference with your spoken word. There's an empowerment there for sure and a rhythm that drives something beyond the regular sharing of ideas in a talk. Have you felt
Mm.
any limitations in that, or is it a growing thing?
I think it is ever growing. It's finding your way in it. I was lucky, as I mentioned earlier, at art school, it was this playground of expression. It was really just you do you. I was so lucky to, and I think contemporary art has gone that way. It might not have looked like that back in the 80s or, when my dad was a student at art school, it might not have looked like the same for him. He would have had pottery classes and all these things that were timetabled that you'd go along to. But I'm very fortunate that I think the only limitation is self-doubt for me. It's just I go, oh, that's too much, or that might not work, or, without trying it. So I think I've really learned to just test things and go with it. And the reason why I did, again, I just want mine to look different from other people's. I just always have felt like the odd one out anyway. So why would my work be the same as other academics and stuff? And I thought, if I stood up at VARC this year and did a PowerPoint presentation on something, I know I would have been a lot of ums and ahs, and I thought the only way I can perform coherently is by poetry and spoken word. I thought, why not just do that and see how it's received? And it seemed that people liked it. So I think that is, or has been since art school, the way that I most like to perform something. It's really, really hard to just stand and talk about yourself. Even this, I wish I had known ahead, and then I would have just made a little poem for each section. No, I'm joking. This is
Mm.
lovely. I feel like that's how I'm most comfortable. The only limitation, not to sound too cheesy, but it really is ourselves. Because even if you have a smaller budget, you can do little things. These don't have to be so limiting. I think I learned that a lot at art school. Because, of course, I was the COVID cohort as well. So we had to just kind of, that's how I kind of got more into digital art was I was at home and I thought I didn't have a lot of money or resources. So I thought I'll just make do with what I have and I can still put something powerful out there. And actually, there's a great group that I had joined as well, the Centre for Artistic Activism. It's an American based, you probably know them, and they are just incredible. I did their course and it was fantastic. So I did that throughout art school as well and had this side course that I would be going to. So I'm always trying to go along to poetry events or creative workshops, even still, even though I've graduated, I still make sure that I'm going along to things and learning, and I just am really, I think that enriches us. So I try not to limit it in that sense, but yeah, I've been very limited by myself.
Fascinating. And I suppose it speaks when you say the limitations kind of set you free in a way. They give you the
Yeah,
creativity,
don't they?
spark of
Aha,
creativity for sure, with the
yeah.
material limitations and maybe vulnerabilities as well. They provide a key to new ways of communicating, which is really exciting. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, this the Center for Autistic Activism is amazing. I always try and get to them, but because they're in America, they're always like in the middle of the night, the talks. Um,
Yeah.
but that course sounds amazing. That's really cool.
Oh, it was
Yeah,
great. It was excellent.
that's amazing. You've talked previously about the past and how things have changed in your creativity and your creative journey.
Hmm.
And you've talked about a specific time where your lecturer said you set you free basically, so let's go.
Oh, yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there a moment within what you've created where you felt you felt that turn as well, where you felt, okay, this is transformative. This matters. This matters more beyond
Mm.
me, or this matters to my own work and where I see myself going. Is there a specific thing that you created that you were like, ah, this is it?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think on that. Because there's been a lot of little ones. It was probably back then, that project. I had people in my class, asking me, okay, I'm having this for lunch. How do I veganize it? I've seen this, you're really making me think here. Can you help me understand what to do? And I thought, oh, wow, okay. Um, and it's hard to measure impact. I think that's another thing I learned at the Centre for Artistic Activism was it's hard to measure that because you never know. People can change and grow in their own, and it is everyone's own journey. But the protest project, I made an artist book, and it was a kind of concertina fold book, and it had various kind of things on it. These you've heard it a million times, not your mum, not your milk, these kind of like messages all through it, and paintings I'd done of cows, and um, all these different collages in there too. And the last page was a mirror, and I invited whoever was viewing it. There was also a little box that I made this ear tag that people could clip on, and it had it looked like nonsense. It just looked like letters or numbers on it, but actually when you viewed it in the mirror, it said someone, not something. And it was, suddenly when it was mirrored, you could read it, and people would be like, oh, that's really interesting. And they looked at it, and that for me was a turning point because I had done what I set out to do. I wanted to get people thinking, and I just didn't know that I didn't have to make still life paintings and stuff. I didn't know I didn't need to do all of that. And just as I said, it was, and I'm glad you mentioned that, it was freeing. She freed me. She said, you're in this a long time, do you? And when I did, it was effective. And I thought, okay, I need to keep doing this. So that would have been the turning kind of project, was the protest project for sure. Yeah.
Wow, that's really inspirational. So
Hmm.
now you're at a point where you're beginning the journey of a PhD.
Oh, Ben.
So exciting. Congratulations. That's so
Thank you
exciting.
so much.
What do you hope to discover? What are the challenges? What are you gonna,
Oof.
what's, what do you hope, what are you hoping to, it's a big word and I shiver at it. What do you hope to contribute to the field that you're in? What's the warm, fuzzy feeling, but also the big head thinking as well?
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for your congratulations. I want to do the project justice. I'm aware that I'm um, I think very differently from how others might have taken it. So it's um, it's going to be challenging to kind of probably stay in my lane and follow that advice that I had, which was stay true to you. I am a great believer in it. So if I can, I will put my own mark on it in some way. But I really just want to add to the movement this amazing, rich history that we actually have, and that we kind of focus on the now and in the future. But let's go back to the past and let's see where the foundations were, and let's see who struggled to make this life. And we can't say that it isn't an easier world now. It truly is probably the easiest time to be vegan. And so looking at the geographical side of that, which linked in really, really well to my master's project, it just seemed like the natural progression to take. And I'm just really looking forward to it. I think I just can't wait to start. And I know it will be super difficult, but I just want to do it justice and the best that I can do. And I have an amazing team that I'm going to be working with. It's just like if you could pick my dream people, they were lined up. And it's truly a dream come true. I never thought that I'd be sat here talking about it. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity and just going to see where it goes. I'm going to see what unfolds, and I can't wait to do the work and really delve into it some more. But it will be challenging. It's
Yeah,
going to be good.
amazing. Do you have a specific title yet? Is it set in stone or changeable?
You know, maybe you'll have to watch and find out.
Watch and wait. Yeah, yeah. Good. I'm glad. That's amazing. That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing all of
Mm.
that. Is there anything I've missed, or is there anything that you'd like to share? Anything that's coming up, or are you at any conferences people can see you talk at, or just bump into you at this summer?
This weekend, I'm going to Birmingham. I'm going to be at the Vegan Society. They've got the exhibition on,
Great.
and I'm going to be seeing Matthew Melsa, formerly Cole. He'll be speaking. There's a few other talks on. It's going to be really, really good. So I'm excited for that. I don't have any other conferences I'm speaking at yet. My peers who are also have done or are doing PhDs, they're like, honestly, enjoy life first before it starts. So working away, really happy to be busy in other ways and keeping active in the community, going to a lot of workshops, a lot of performances, and supporting everyone else in the meantime that I can. I'll be at the IAVS conference. I'll be not speaking, but I'm going to go along and have a listen to that. I think it's October time, run by the amazing Cody Wren. And that's going to be super good too. Thank you so much again for inviting me on. I love our chats. Thank you so much.
A huge thank you to Lauren Marie for such a rich and inspiring conversation. From poetry to protest, satire to scholarship, Lauren Marie's work reminds us that creativity is not just a form of expression, it's a form of resistance, reflection, and radical care. If you'd like to explore more of her work, you can visit her website, laurenmariekennedy.com, where you'll find links to her writing, performances, and research. For more episodes, resources, and insights into creative activism, head to performinganimalrights.org, where you can also subscribe to our Substack newsletter and access the other episodes recorded for this podcast series. And until next time, goodbye.